11:47 p.m., July 14, 1995, Las Vegas. The city's neon veins pulse with life, but in the shadows something is about to go terribly wrong. The night air is thick, humming with the distant echo of slot machines and the low, restless murmur of the Strip. But here, in the staff parking lot behind the Mirage, the world feels deserted. Fluorescent lights flicker overhead, casting long, trembling shadows across the cracked asphalt. A lone figure walks briskly, Emily Carter, 24. Her casino uniform crisp, her hair pulled back, her eyes darting to the far end of the lot. She clutches her purse tightly, keys already in hand, the metallic jingle swallowed by the vast emptiness. A security camera blinks, its red light steady, capturing her final steps. The timestamp burns into the grainy footage, 11:48 p.m. Emily glances over her shoulder, a nervous habit. The city is alive, but this corner is silent, save for the distant wail of a siren and the soft, rhythmic click of her heels. She passes a row of parked cars, their windshields reflecting the garish glow of casino lights. Somewhere a dog barks, somewhere a door slams, but here time seems to slow, every second stretching into eternity. She reaches her car, a faded blue Honda Civic, dusted with the desert's fine grit. She unlocks the door, slides into the driver's seat and pauses. For a moment she sits motionless, illuminated by the dashboard's pale green light. Her face is tired, but there's a flicker of relief. The end of another long shift. She reaches for the ignition. Then something. A shadow moves behind her. The camera's angle is wrong. The lens catches only a blur, a fleeting shape in the periphery. Emily's head turns, startled. Her mouth opens as if to speak or scream. But the sound never comes. The timestamp reads 11:49 p.m. minutes pass. The parking lot remains empty, save for the silent witness of the camera. At 12:34 a.m., a security guard making his rounds notices something strange. Emily's car door is ajar, swinging gently in the warm breeze. The keys dangle from the ignition, swaying back and forth. Her purse sits on the passenger seat untouched. There is no sign of struggle, no footprints leading away. Just the eerie stillness of a life interrupted. The city's lights blaze on, indifferent. But in this forgotten corner, a mystery is born. A young woman has vanished, leaving behind only questions and the faintest trace of fear. How does someone disappear in a city that never sleeps? But the answers would not come easily. Not for Emily, not for her family, and not for the city of Las Vegas. The night had changed everything. And the darkness was only beginning to settle in. Before the headlines, before the search parties and the whispered rumors, there was only Emily Carter, a daughter, a friend, a young woman with dreams as bright as the city she called home. Emily grew up in the sun-bleached suburbs on the edge of Las Vegas, where the desert met the sprawl of tract homes and the air shimmered with heat. Her childhood was filled with laughter and the scent of creosote after rain, her world shaped by the steady love of her mother, Linda, and the quiet strength of her older brother, Mark. Even as a child, Emily was drawn to the city's lights, fascinated by the promise of possibility that seemed to hang in the air above the Strip. She was the kind of girl who stayed late after school to help clean up, who remembered birthdays, who danced barefoot in the living room to old records. By 1995, Emily was 24, working nights as a cocktail waitress at the Mirage. The job was demanding, the hours long, but she wore her uniform with pride. She was saving for nursing school, tucking away tips in a battered envelope hidden in her dresser. Her friends described her as loyal, quick to laugh, the one who always made sure everyone got home safe. She was the last to leave the dance floor, one friend would later recall, her voice trembling with memory. She just lit up a room. But Las Vegas was a city of contradictions. For every dazzling marquee, there was a shadowed alley. For every winner, a dozen losers. Emily knew the risks. She was careful, wary of the men who lingered too long at her tables, who pressed folded bills into her hand with lingering glances. She kept her keys between her fingers when she walked to her car, always looking over her shoulder. Still, she believed in the city's promise, in the idea that hard work and hope could carve out a future. Even here, the city itself was a character in Emily's story, restless, hungry, alive at all hours. The Strip pulsed with energy, but just beyond the neon, the world grew quieter, lonelier. In the neighborhoods where Emily lived and worked, people watched out for each other, but they also kept secrets. The desert was never far away, its emptiness pressing in at the edges of every street. No one imagined that the city's shadows would one day swallow Emily whole. She was too careful, too loved, too alive. But on that July night, all the bright possibilities of her life were snuffed out in an instant, leaving only questions and the ache of absence. In the days to come, her face would appear on flyers and news broadcasts, her smile frozen in time. But for those who knew her, Emily was never just a headline. She was hope, laughter, and the promise of something better, a promise the city would fail to keep. But the city was about to wake up to a nightmare. And the clock was already ticking. The final 47 minutes of Emily Carter's known life would become a puzzle that haunted investigators for decades, a sequence of ordinary actions, each one loaded with meaning in hindsight, each one a step closer to the void. It began at 10:47 p.m. as Emily clocked out from her shift at the Mirage. Surveillance footage captured her at the employee exit, exchanging a tired smile with the security guard, her uniform jacket slung over one arm. She paused to check her phone, the screen's blue glow briefly illuminating her face. A text to her roommate, "On my way home, so tired." The timestamp, 10:49 p.m. She made her way through the labyrinth of back hallways, past the clatter of kitchen staff and the low hum of slot machines. At 10:56 p.m., she was seen in the break room, chatting with a co-worker, laughter echoing off the linoleum. She seemed happy, the co-worker would later recall, just ready to get home. By 11:10 p.m., Emily was outside, the night air heavy with the scent of hot asphalt and distant cigarette smoke. She walked with purpose, her steps quick, her eyes scanning the lot. A security camera caught her passing a row of cars, her reflection flickering in the glass. At 11:18 p.m., she paused to wave at a friend, pulling out of a nearby parking space. The friend would later tell police, "She looked fine. Just tired. I wish I'd stayed longer." The minutes ticked by. At 11:27 p.m., a witness, a valet on a smoke break, noticed Emily talking to a man near the far end of the lot. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, his face obscured by shadow. The conversation seemed brief, casual. The valet didn't hear what was said, only that Emily's posture was tense, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. The man gestured toward the street, then turned away. Emily watched him go, then continued toward her car. At 11:41 p.m., the last clear image, Emily unlocking her Honda Civic, glancing over her shoulder one final time. The lot was nearly empty now, the city's noise muffled by distance. She slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and for a moment everything was still. Then at 11:47 p.m., the security camera caught a blur, a figure moving quickly toward Emily's car. The footage was grainy, the details lost in shadow. There was no sound, no struggle visible, just a sudden interruption in the night's routine. The timestamp burned into the tape, 11:49 p.m. After that, nothing. No one saw Emily leave. No one heard a scream. Her phone went silent. The next time anyone would see her car, it would be abandoned, door ajar, keys dangling, purse untouched. At 12:34 a.m., the world would discover that Emily Carter was gone. In those 47 minutes, a life had vanished, leaving behind only silence and the first threads of a mystery that would unravel for years. But the search for answers was only beginning, and the city was about to be pulled into the darkness with her. The first hours after Emily Carter's disappearance were a blur of confusion, urgency, and mounting dread. In the neon-lit city that prided itself on never missing a beat, the sudden vanishing of a young woman from a casino parking lot sent ripples of disbelief through every level of law enforcement. At 12:34 a.m., a security guard radioed in the discovery. Emily's car. Door wide open, keys still in the ignition, purse untouched on the passenger seat. The scene was eerily undisturbed, as if she had simply evaporated into the night air. Within minutes, the Mirage's security team was combing the lot, flashlights slicing through the darkness, voices echoing off concrete. The police arrived soon after, their cruiser's red and blue lights painting the scene in urgent, flickering color. Detective Michael Ruiz was among the first on site. He would later recall the surreal stillness, the way the city's constant hum seemed to fade, replaced by the low murmur of officers and the static crackle of radios. "We thought we'd find her by sunrise," he would say, his voice heavy with the memory of hope that would soon curdle into frustration. Officers fanned out, searching the perimeter, checking dumpsters, alleys, and the scrubby desert brush that pressed up against the edge of the lot. They questioned the night staff, reviewed security footage, and canvassed nearby businesses. The Mirage's security tapes were pulled and rewound, the grainy images scrutinized frame by frame. But the footage offered only shadows and questions, a blur of movement, a figure in a baseball cap, a car door closing, then nothing. By 2 a.m. the search had expanded. K9 units arrived, their handlers urging them to sniff for any trace of Emily's scent. Helicopters swept the area, their searchlights probing the darkness from above. The city's pulse continued, oblivious, but in this corner of Las Vegas time seemed to freeze. Leads trickled in, each one more desperate than the last. A cab driver thought he'd seen a woman matching Emily's description near the Strip. A bartender reported a heated argument in the parking lot earlier that night. Every tip was logged, every rumor chased down. But as the hours dragged on, hope began to slip away, replaced by a gnawing sense of helplessness. By dawn, the reality was sinking in. There was no sign of Emily, no struggle, no blood, no evidence of where she had gone or who had taken her. The trail was already growing cold, the city's vastness swallowing up the clues as quickly as they appeared. The investigation had begun, but it was already clear this would be no ordinary missing persons case. The chaos of those first hours would set the tone for the years to come, a case defined by confusion, frustration, and the relentless search for answers that always seemed just out of reach. But as the sun rose over Las Vegas, the city itself was waking to the news. And soon the shock would spread far beyond the casino walls. Morning brought no relief. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the desert, the news of Emily Carter's disappearance began to ripple through Las Vegas, spreading from the Mirage's break room to the city's crowded streets and quiet neighborhoods. What started as a whisper among casino staff quickly grew into a wave of fear and speculation that washed over the entire community. At first there was disbelief. Emily was well known, not just among her co-workers, but in the local diners and corner stores where she'd grown up. Her face, smiling and familiar, was suddenly everywhere, on hastily printed flyers taped to lampposts, on the morning news, in the worried conversations of neighbors. "It can't be her," people said, shaking their heads. "Not Emily." But as the hours passed and the search dragged on, disbelief gave way to something darker. Fear settled over the city like a heavy shroud. Parents clutched their children's hands a little tighter. Waitresses walked to their cars in groups, glancing nervously over their shoulders. The Mirage's staff, once a tight-knit family, now eyed each other with suspicion, every stranger a potential threat. Rumors began to swirl, fed by the city's insatiable appetite for gossip. Some whispered that Emily had run away, that she'd been seen boarding a bus out of town. Others insisted it was a jealous ex-boyfriend or a disgruntled customer with a grudge. Theories multiplied, each one more outlandish than the last. "They say it was someone from inside," a bartender confided to a reporter, her voice low. "Someone who knew her routine." The local news seized on every detail, broadcasting updates with breathless urgency. Candlelight vigils sprang up outside the Mirage, the soft glow of hundreds of flames flickering against the night. Friends and strangers alike gathered, holding hands, praying for Emily's safe return. The city's collective grief was palpable, a raw wound that refused to heal. But beneath the surface, suspicion festered. People began to look at each other differently, trust eroding with every unanswered question. The sense of safety that had once defined their community was gone, replaced by a constant gnawing anxiety. "If it could happen to Emily," one neighbor said, "it could happen to any of us." As days turned into weeks, the city's hope began to wane. The flyers faded in the sun, the vigils grew smaller, and the rumors only grew louder. Everyone had a theory. No one had answers. But in the shadows, the investigation pressed on. And for the detectives assigned to Emily's case, the pressure was mounting. The city demanded answers. The family demanded justice. And the truth, still hidden, waited to be unearthed. The case file grew thicker with each passing day, a weight that pressed down on the desks and minds of the detectives assigned to Emily Carter's disappearance. For Detective Michael Ruiz, it became more than just another investigation. It became an obsession, a shadow that followed him home and haunted his dreams. Ruiz was a veteran of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police, a man known for his tenacity and his refusal to let go of a case no matter how cold it grew. But nothing in his years on the force had prepared him for the silence that surrounded Emily's vanishing. Every morning he returned to the evidence board in his cramped office, the walls plastered with photographs, maps, and timelines. Red string connected faces and places, looping endlessly, a web with no center. Emily's smiling face stared out from the center, a constant reminder of what was at stake. He pored over every detail, every witness statement, every second of grainy security footage. He replayed the last known moments of Emily's life until the images blurred together, searching for something, anything that might have been missed. He called in favors, pressed informants, and chased down leads that took him from the glittering lights of the Strip to the city's forgotten edges. Each night he returned home later, his wife watching him with growing concern as he scribbled notes in a battered journal, unable to let the case rest. The pressure from above was relentless. The media demanded updates. Emily's family called daily, their voices raw with hope and desperation. Ruiz felt the weight of their grief, the unspoken accusation in every conversation. Why haven't you found her? Why haven't you brought her home? Sleep became a luxury. Ruiz found himself waking in the middle of the night, heart pounding, mind racing with possibilities. He retraced Emily's steps in his mind over and over, convinced that the answer was there, hidden in plain sight. He grew short-tempered, snapping at colleagues, pushing his team harder than ever. The case consumed him, blurring the line between duty and obsession. He wasn't alone. Other detectives cycled through the case, each leaving their mark, each eventually worn down by the endless dead ends. But Ruiz refused to let go. "This one's different," he wrote in his journal. "She's out there. Someone knows something. I can't let her down." He didn't know then that the case would haunt him for decades, that the answers he sought would remain just out of reach for years to come. But even as hope faded and the city moved on, Ruiz clung to the belief that the truth was still waiting to be found, but the clues would not add up, not yet. And the darkness around Emily's disappearance was only growing deeper. The years that followed Emily Carter's disappearance were marked by a relentless cycle of hope and heartbreak, a carousel of false leads, dead ends, and the slow grinding erosion of certainty. For Detective Ruiz and his team, the case became a labyrinth with no exit, every promising clue dissolving into disappointment. In the first year alone, dozens of tips poured in. Anonymous callers claimed to have seen Emily in distant cities, Phoenix, Reno, even as far as Seattle. Each sighting was investigated, each one ending in the same cold silence. A woman matching Emily's description was spotted at a bus station, but the security footage revealed only a stranger with the same dark hair and tired eyes. Another tip led detectives to a motel on the outskirts of town, where a room was found hastily abandoned, but no trace of Emily. The investigation's scope widened. Detectives interviewed ex-boyfriends, co-workers, and anyone who had crossed paths with Emily in the weeks before she vanished. Polygraph tests were administered, alibis checked and rechecked. A man with a history of violence was brought in for questioning after boasting about knowing what happened to that Mirage girl. But his story unraveled under scrutiny. Another cruel mirage in a city built on illusion. The media's attention, once feverish, began to wane. Headlines faded, replaced by newer tragedies. But for Emily's family, every phone call was a potential breakthrough, every knock at the door a possible return. Every time the phone rang, "We hoped it was her," her mother would later say, her voice brittle with years of waiting. Every time it wasn't, Detective Ruiz kept the case alive, refusing to let it slip into the archives. He followed up on every rumor, no matter how far-fetched. He drove through the desert at dawn, searching for shallow graves. He sat in his car outside the Mirage, watching the parking lot, replaying the night in his mind. But the city offered no answers, only more questions. As the years passed, the investigation became a ghost haunting the department. New detectives cycled in, bringing fresh eyes and renewed energy, but the result was always the same. The evidence grew stale. Memories faded, and witnesses moved away or forgot. By the year 2000, Emily's file was gathering dust, buried beneath the weight of newer cases and fresher tragedies. The hope that had once burned so brightly was now a flicker, kept alive only by the stubborn persistence of those who refused to forget. But the truth remained elusive, hidden somewhere in the city's endless shadows. Yet even as the case seemed destined to remain unsolved, the story was not over. The cold silence would not last forever. And somewhere, a clue waited to be found, a clue that would change everything. As the investigation slowed and the years slipped by, the weight of Emily Carter's absence settled heavily on those who loved her most. The world moved on, but for her family, time seemed to freeze in the moment she vanished. The ache of not knowing became a constant companion, a silent presence in every room, every holiday, every ordinary day that Emily should have been there. Her mother, Linda, kept Emily's bedroom exactly as she'd left it. The bed was made, the dresser still cluttered with perfume bottles and old movie ticket stubs. On the wall, a faded photograph captured Emily's smile, forever young, forever out of reach. Linda set a place for her daughter at the table every Christmas, refusing to let go of hope, even as the years made it harder to believe. "I just want to know what happened," she would whisper into the quiet of the house, her words swallowed by the emptiness. Mark, Emily's older brother, tried to be strong for his mother, but the loss gnawed at him in ways he couldn't express. He replayed their last conversation over and over, searching for something he might have missed, a warning, a plea for help, anything that could have changed what happened. He grew distant, his laughter rare, his eyes always shadowed by the weight of his sister's disappearance. Friends drifted away, unable to bear the constant reminder of what was lost. The phone stopped ringing. The casseroles and cards stopped coming. The world outside seemed indifferent, the city's bright lights a cruel contrast to the darkness that had settled over the Carter home. Old home videos became both comfort and torment, each frame a reminder of the life that had been stolen. The missing posters faded, their colors bleached by the relentless Nevada sun. Emily's case became just another file in the cold case unit, her name spoken less and less as the years passed. But for her family, the pain never dulled. Grief became a routine, a ritual of waiting and wondering. How do you mourn someone when hope refuses to die? How do you move forward when every day is haunted by the same unanswered question? Detective Ruiz, too, felt the toll. He visited Linda from time to time, offering updates that grew less frequent, less hopeful. He saw the toll the case had taken, not just on the family but on himself. The lines on his face deepened, his voice grew softer, the fire of obsession now tempered by sorrow. The city had forgotten, but the Carters could not. Their lives were defined by absence, by the empty chair at the table, by the echo of a voice they would never hear again. The cold case was more than a file. It was a wound that refused to heal. But in the quiet, something was stirring. The story was not finished, and hope, though battered, was not yet gone. 17 years after Emily Carter vanished, the case file sat buried in the archives, its edges worn, its pages yellowed by time. But in 2012, a new detective joined the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's cold case unit, a woman named Detective Sarah Kim, known for her sharp instincts and relentless drive. She brought with her a fresh perspective and, crucially, a belief in the power of new forensic technology. Detective Kim began by reviewing the old evidence, her eyes scanning every page, every photograph, every faded note. She noticed things others had missed, small inconsistencies, overlooked details, gaps in the timeline. But it was the physical evidence that drew her attention most. The items collected from Emily's car, sealed in evidence bags for nearly 2 decades. Among them, a single strand of hair found on the passenger seat, logged and stored but never fully analyzed with modern methods. By 2012, DNA technology had advanced far beyond what was possible in 1995. Kim sent the hair to the state crime lab, requesting a full DNA profile. Weeks passed, the anticipation building with each day. The lab's machines hummed and whirred, extracting secrets from the past. When the results finally arrived, they revealed something extraordinary, a partial DNA match to a man already in the national database, a man with a criminal record but no known connection to Emily. Kim dug deeper, cross-referencing the DNA hit with old witness statements and employment records from the Mirage. She pored over security footage, pausing on the blurry figure in the baseball cap, comparing his build and gait to the suspect's mugshots. The pieces began to fit together, forming a picture that had eluded investigators for years. But Kim knew she needed more. She re-interviewed witnesses, tracking down former employees who had long since left Las Vegas. Some remembered nothing. Others, after all these years, recalled small details. A strange car in the lot, a man loitering near the exit, a feeling of unease that night. Each memory was a thread, and Kim wove them together with the precision of a master investigator. The breakthrough electrified the department. For the first time in years, there was hope, a real, tangible lead. The cold case unit buzzed with activity, old detectives returning to offer advice, the Carter family daring to believe that answers might finally be within reach. Faust's single hair, preserved for 17 years, had cracked open the silence. The investigation was reborn, driven by new technology and the determination of a detective who refused to let the past remain buried. But the truth, once awakened, would not rest quietly. And as Kim closed in on her suspect, the city braced itself for revelations that would shake it to its core. The DNA match pointed to a name that sent a chill through the cold case unit. Thomas Avery. On paper, he was unremarkable. A maintenance worker who had drifted from job to job, blending into the background of Las Vegas's endless service industry. But as Detective Kim dug into his past, a pattern began to emerge, one that connected him to the Mirage in the summer of 1995. Avery had worked night shifts at the casino, his duties taking him through the same back hallways and parking lots that Emily Carter once walked. He was never a suspect in the original investigation. His name appeared only briefly in employment records, lost among hundreds of others. But the DNA did not lie. The partial match from the hair found in Emily's car was enough to put him at the scene, enough to demand answers. Kim pored over old photographs, searching for Avery's face in the background of staff parties and group shots. There he was, always on the edge of the frame, never drawing attention. She found his signature on maintenance logs from the night Emily disappeared. Routine entries. Nothing suspicious at first glance. But the timing was uncanny. Avery had signed out just minutes after Emily was last seen alive. The more Kim uncovered, the more unsettling the picture became. Avery had attended the candlelight vigils for Emily, standing quietly among the crowd, his face expressionless. He had even offered condolences to her family, his words polite, his presence unremarkable. He was at every vigil, one former co-worker recalled, her voice trembling. He just stood there watching. Neighbors described Avery as quiet, polite, a man who kept to himself. But beneath the surface, there were hints of something darker. An arrest for assault in 2002, a restraining order filed by a former girlfriend, a history of sudden disappearances from jobs whenever questions were asked. No one had ever connected the dots. No one had ever looked closely enough. As Kim built her case, she felt the weight of the community's trust and the family's hope. The idea that the man responsible for Emily's disappearance had lived among them, had mourned with them, was almost too much to bear. The city, already scarred by years of uncertainty, now faced the possibility that the monster had been hiding in plain sight all along. The evidence was mounting, the net tightening. But Kim knew that confronting Avery would be dangerous. He had evaded suspicion for nearly 2 decades, slipping through the cracks of a city built on illusion. Now, with the truth closing in, there was no telling what he might do. No one suspected the monster was among them. But the time for shadows was ending, and the final act of the investigation was about to begin. The confrontation with Thomas Avery unfolded in a small, windowless interrogation room at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. The air was thick with tension, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting harsh shadows across the table where Avery sat, hands folded, eyes fixed on the floor. Detective Kim entered, her file thick with evidence, her voice steady but edged with the weight of years. For hours, Avery denied everything. He claimed he barely remembered Emily Carter, insisted he had nothing to do with her disappearance. But Kim pressed on, laying out the evidence piece by piece, the DNA match, the maintenance logs, the witness statements, the timeline that placed him in the parking lot at the exact moment Emily vanished. Each fact was a stone, building a wall around Avery, closing off every escape. The silence grew heavier. Avery's composure began to crack. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His hands trembled. Kim watched him carefully, her questions relentless but calm. She spoke of Emily, not as a case but as a person, a daughter, a sister, a life stolen and a family left in ruins. The words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Finally, something shifted. Avery's shoulders slumped, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I never meant for it to happen," he said, the words tumbling out raw and broken. He described that night in halting detail, how he'd seen Emily alone in the lot, how a chance encounter had spiraled out of control. He spoke of anger, of fear, of a moment that could not be undone. The truth, after so many years, was darker than anyone had imagined. Avery led detectives to a remote patch of desert outside the city, where beneath the hard-packed earth they found the remains of Emily Carter. The discovery brought a wave of shock and sorrow, the final confirmation of what so many had feared, but never dared to say aloud. The city that had searched for Emily, that had whispered her name in hope and dread, now mourned her in certainty. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. News cameras crowded the courthouse steps. Headlines blared, "Arrest shocks Las Vegas." For Emily's family there was relief, but also a fresh wave of grief, a wound reopened by the details of her final moments. Detective Kim stood with them, her own face marked by exhaustion and resolve. Justice at last had come. But the cost was immeasurable. The truth had been buried for nearly 2 decades, hidden in plain sight, protected by silence and fear. Now, with Avery in custody and Emily finally brought home, the city was left to reckon with the darkness that had lived among them. But even as the case closed, the questions lingered. How many others had slipped through the cracks? How many secrets still waited in the shadows? The search for answers was over, but the search for meaning had only just begun. The trial of Thomas Avery became a spectacle, drawing crowds to the courthouse and dominating headlines across Las Vegas. The city, still reeling from the shock of his arrest, watched as the details of Emily Carter's final night were laid bare in the harsh light of the courtroom. Prosecutors presented the evidence with clinical precision: the DNA match, the confession, the timeline that left no room for doubt. Avery sat impassive, his face a mask, as witness after witness recounted the years of pain and uncertainty that had followed Emily's disappearance. For Emily's family, the proceedings were both a relief and a torment. They listened as the prosecution described the night Emily vanished, the years of searching, the moment her remains were found in the desert. Linda Carter, Emily's mother, took the stand, her voice trembling as she spoke of birthdays missed, holidays spent in silence, the empty chair at every family gathering. "We waited for her every day," she said, her words echoing through the courtroom. "Now we know, now we can grieve." The jury deliberated for less than a day. The verdict, guilty on all counts, was met with a collective exhale from the city, a sense that at last justice had been served. Avery was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was filled with tears, some of relief, some of sorrow, all touched by the weight of what had been lost. Outside, the community struggled to process the truth. The revelation that Avery had lived among them, had mourned with them, had hidden in plain sight, left a scar that would not soon heal. News headlines screamed, "Arrest shocks Las Vegas." Candlelight vigils were held once more, this time in memory, not in hope. The city's collective grief was raw, but there was also a sense of closure, a belief that finally the story had an ending. Yet, even as the dust settled, questions remained. How had Avery evaded suspicion for so long? Could more have been done? The detectives who had worked the case for years wrestled with their own regrets, replaying decisions, wondering what clues they might have missed. For Detective Kim, the victory was bittersweet. She had brought justice, but the cost was a family's lifetime of pain. Emily's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the darkness that can hide behind the most ordinary faces. The city, forever changed, moved forward with a new wariness, a new understanding of how fragile safety could be. Justice had come, but at what cost? The question lingered unanswered as the city tried to heal. And in the quiet that followed, the memory of Emily Carter remained, a light extinguished, but never forgotten. The courtroom verdict brought a measure of closure, but the story of Emily Carter did not end with the clang of a gavel or the closing of a case file. In the months and years that followed, the city of Las Vegas, Emily's family, and those who had searched for her were left to grapple with the aftermath, a landscape forever altered by loss, justice and the shadows that remained. For Linda Carter, the journey from hope to heartbreak to resolution was both a relief and a new kind of pain. She visited Emily's grave often, leaving fresh flowers and speaking softly to the headstone, her words a mixture of apology and love. "I'm sorry it took so long," she would whisper, her hand resting on the cool stone. The rituals of grief became a way to keep Emily close, to honor the life that was stolen but never forgotten. The empty chair at family gatherings was no longer a symbol of waiting, but of remembrance, a quiet testament to a daughter's enduring presence. Detective Sarah Kim, too, felt the weight of the case long after the cameras left and the headlines faded. She kept a photograph of Emily on her desk, a reminder of why she had chosen this work. The case had changed her, deepened her resolve, and left her with a new understanding of the cost of justice. She often thought of the years lost, the clues missed, and the family still waiting for answers. The victory was bittersweet, shadowed by the knowledge that not every story would end with the truth revealed. The city itself bore the scars of the case. For months, conversations in coffee shops and on street corners returned to the question of trust. How could someone so ordinary, so unremarkable as Thomas Avery, have hidden in plain sight for so long? The community, once bound by hope, now found itself united by caution. Parents watched their children more closely. Neighbors looked out for one another, but also looked twice at strangers. The sense of safety that had once defined their world was gone, replaced by a wary vigilance. Yet in the midst of sorrow, there were moments of healing. Candlelight vigils became memorials, places where stories were shared and memories kept alive. Emily's friends organized a scholarship in her name, helping young women pursue the dreams she never had the chance to fulfill. Her legacy became a quiet force for good, a way to turn tragedy into hope for others, but some wounds never fully heal. In Las Vegas, the lights never go out, but the shadows linger, reminders of the darkness that can hide behind. The years after the case's resolution were a time of slow, painful healing. Linda Carter, who had spent nearly 2 decades searching for answers, now faced the challenge of living with them. She visited Emily's grave often, sometimes alone, sometimes with Mark. The ache of loss was still there, but it was different now, less frantic, more settled, a sorrow that had found its place in the rhythm of daily life. Linda became an advocate for families of the missing, speaking at vigils and support groups, her voice steady with the hard-won wisdom of someone who had survived the unthinkable. "You never stop loving them," she would say. "You just learn to live with the questions." Detective Sarah Kim, too, carried the case with her. The photograph of Emily remained on her desk, a silent reminder of the work still to be done. The Carter case had changed her, sharpening her instincts and deepening her empathy. She continued to work cold cases, driven by the knowledge that every file represented a family waiting for answers, a story waiting to be told. The victory was real, but so was the cost. The city itself was changed. The Mirage parking lot, once just another anonymous corner of Las Vegas, became a place of uneasy memory. Locals spoke of the case in hushed tones, a cautionary tale passed down to new generations. The community, once shaken by fear and suspicion, slowly found ways to come together, organizing neighborhood watches, supporting victims' families, and refusing to let Emily's story be forgotten. Emily's legacy lived on in unexpected ways. The scholarship fund in her name helped young women pursue their dreams, a tribute to the life she never got to live. Her friends and family gathered each year on the anniversary of her disappearance, lighting candles and sharing stories, determined to keep her memory alive. In these acts of remembrance, there was both pain and hope, a recognition that while some wounds never fully heal, they can inspire acts of kindness and resilience. But in Las Vegas, the lights never go out. The city moves on, but the shadows remain, a reminder that even the brightest places can harbor secrets. The story of Emily Carter is a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of community, and the enduring need for justice. Some questions will never be answered. Some scars will never fade. But in the end, Emily's story is not just one of loss, but of love, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit. In the City of Lights, her memory endures, a beacon in the darkness, a promise that she will never be forgotten.